Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another exciting episode of All About You. In today's segment, I will be talking about sideboarding. Sideboarding is very crucial, especially game 2 and 3 against your opponent, because when you're playing a best of 3 format, you want to give yourself an advantage against decks that you normally may be able to beat, or you want to give yourself a fighting chance against the decks that you're weak against. So I'm going to give you an example of obviously the deck that I used and give you some options of how I sideboard and what is my thought process into it. And then I'm going to talk about it of how you can use this type of information to your benefit when we're discussing other leaders. So for one, as you guys know, I played Super Shenron for the last event. Now, Super Shenron is a very powerful leader. It's one of the most talked about leaders because of what it can do. And obviously, you guys know many people are not satisfied with it because a lot of people believe in the right hands, it's just too powerful, which I can understand. But this deck actually does have some weak matchups. One of the primary weak matchups that it does have is against our man, Broly. This guy is very powerful against this deck game 1 because this guy, I was running the Heightened Mastery edition. He basically says, oh, it's cute. You try to go into Heightened Mastery. You want to swap from your Path to Greatness on turn 4 into Heightened Mastery and tap me out. Cool, I don't care if I have no energy. Because basically this guy says, as long as I have a Broly on board, as soon as you try to swing out with your Heightened Mastery, whatever you combo, it doesn't really matter. Because this guy says, hey, I'm just going to use one of my Broly battle cards and discard a card and pop the Heightened Mastery. And there goes the turn. And even if they decide, hey, I'm going to go right into Victory Strike after they go into the Heightened Mastery by using, let's say, a Child's Wish to get some energy going, untapping with their Boma and whatnot. Same thing goes to this guy. Use one of the battle cards, you drop a card from your hand and you pop their Victory Strike because none of them have barrier, and that's the main thing. And even if you did have barrier, you basically have an 8-drop in this deck that can say pop ignoring barrier, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to put things into perspective of what's the proper way to sideboard and decide. So obviously this guy, the weaknesses of the deck against this guy is the Heightened Mastery package. So the type of cards I would side out would be these guys. This would be the primary card sided out. You're going to have to excuse me because I don't have the other cards, and this. So as many copies as I run, in my last build, I ran 3. So one of them, these 3 would be sided out, including the Victory Strike. Now the card I would side in replacement against that matchup, again, we're talking about this guy, would be Haru. So I would sideboard the 4 Haru in replacement of this. So these 4, this is at 3. I would side these 4 out for the Harus. In this matchup, again, these guys don't do much. Unfortunately, they're very good cards and very powerful. But when you're playing against this matchup, the 6 and 8 drop off of 1 card discarding, they could just pop any one of these, and they're pretty much fragile when it comes down to removal. So that's one thing that you want to know. So easy side out would be these in for these. Now, additionally, in the matchup, cards like this guy would be very good. And the reason why is because that deck provides a lot of 6 to 8 drops that are powerful. The Broly deck basically runs on having your 6 to 8 drop out, including your secret rare. So putting him in the deck would help you greatly. And one of the cards I would sideboard out for him would be a Son Goku Path to Greatness. Son Goku Path to Greatness would be an easy sideboard card out because I'm not really executing the chain. I now no longer have Heightened Mastery or Victory Strike. A lot of players were asking me, hey Anthony, how do we play against the matchup? What do we side out? And here we go. So this would get sided out for this card. And now we already have a successful 5 cards sideboarded in the deck, ready to take on Broly. We can abuse Child's Wish in this deck by bringing out our Harus. And then we have our Overwhelm card that pretty much says, hey, I can get rid of my opponent's Broly if I don't want them using that ability to pop any of my guys. So I basically restrict their ability to do anything or counteract my deck, essentially. Now, moving on to other sideboard options. If I'm playing against the Kid Goku leader, as you can see, this is also a very common leader that you will find in every tournament, the same way you would find Broly. Normally, there's like 10 to 15 Broly decks at attendance, And this guy normally has a 20 to 30 radius, sometimes even more than that. Sometimes we have 40 people playing this deck. Now, this guy works a little bit different because it's based on the colors that you play against. So for example, if I'm playing against the yellow variant is pretty strong because they have access to Flying Nimbus and they have access to other cards that can try to slow down the game. In fact, they also have cards that work well against this deck in terms of Bad Ring. They can try to stop your negates. If you have your Flying Nimbus, they can try to stop you. So a good card that would be great against this matchup, outside of your Heightened Mastery, would be Bad Ring Laser. So Bad Ring Laser is a very powerful card because it can shut down any negates. So if you're worried about your opponent trying to build up some type of defense against your deck, you use Bad Ring, which is obviously another talked about card, and you can stop them. In fact, it's also very good against this matchup as well if you notice that they're running cards like Flying Nimbus. Not every Broly deck runs Flying Nimbus, but if you notice that you're playing against a deck that does, you want to sideboard the Bad Rings for the decks that have Flying Nimbus because you want to stop them from saving themselves and essentially put on as much pressure as you can, either with your big battle cards or your Storm package in your Super Shenron deck. So now, when we're talking about other type of decks, because a lot of people are like, well, Anthony, that's great, but how do I sideboard depending on what I play? So for example, Chain Attack Xeno decks. Chain Attack Xeno decks can vary from being Pan, Baby Vegeta, Gogeta, there's so many different variants. So if you are utilizing those type of decks, you want to be able to sideboard cards like minus Killy Zone. And the reason why you want to do that is when you play against Cold Bloodlust based decks, they can stop your combination from trying to reset the game and put it in your favor. So you want to make sure that you sideboard cards like minus Killy Zone because that would be very advantageous for your strategy. So every Chain Attack Xeno deck should have anywhere from 2 to 3 minus Killy Zones in their sideboard. That would allow you access to being able to stop your opponent when you need to go for the reset. Now, obviously, depending on the matchup, you may have to decide certain cards that are not favorable. You always side out the cards that don't really do much against the current matchup you're going up against. Every deck has them. There's not one deck that has pretty much a great matchup across the board, other than maybe your Super Shenron decks versus the Kid Gokus. You might have a really good matchup there, depending on the variant. But outside of that, there's so many cards that you could decide and add in the deck so that you can have a better matchup. That's all sideboarding is. Game 2 and Game 3 are the most crucial matchups, and they also depend on whether you go second or first. If you're going first or second, you may want to sideboard, let's say if you win Game 1. Game 2, you side out accordingly because you know that your opponent is going first. Now, if you notice that you go into Game 3, you know now you're going first because you took Game 1. You might want to reevaluate your sideboard options because they may benefit you in Game 3. So always keep that in mind. That should help you as far as being able to know what you want to take out of your deck and add in. Now, obviously, I can't give you a full breakdown for every type of deck. I gave you the deck that I used at the recent tournament because it's a little bit easier to kind of decipher, hey, what's viable and what's not. But if you guys want me to do another coverage on sideboard options, definitely leave it in the comment section below and tell me what decks you want me to go over. I gave you some general concepts. Again, Chain Attack Xeno decks, they can vary from depending on whatever you're playing. You can be playing a blue, red leader. Those are the most common, especially using that combination. And then if you're using, let's say, Cold Bloodlust decks. Cold Bloodlust decks, obviously, you don't have to main board that many Cold Bloodlust in the matchup. You may only have 2 or 3 main board, and you can sideboard the rest accordingly, because not every deck you want to Cold Bloodlust them. Some decks are not really susceptible for Cold Bloodlust. Some decks you might want to incorporate cards like Crusher Ball. Crusher Ball is definitely one of the cards that you want to utilize when you're going up against certain matchups, especially like the AOD matchup that's susceptible to Crusher Ball. And of course, it's susceptible to Cold Bloodlust. The only bad thing is that the AOD decks, they have hard counters, which are minus Killy Zone, which is one of the main cards I just discussed earlier. But the best thing you can use against that matchup is a good Flying Nimbus. So if you're playing yellow, you can stop your opponent on their tracks because most AOD decks don't have the ability to stop you. So guys and girls, this was a general concept of what you should side in and side out. I showed you what my approach is with my Super Shenron deck against the most talked about decks, the most represented decks. If you want any other information, as I said before, leave them in the comment section below and I will answer them, or I might even make another video if it becomes something that apparent. Thank you for watching, and as always, this channel is all about you.